Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad to chair this meeting today. My name is Reinhard Six. I'm working in the European Investment Bank in the Energy Efficiency and Small-Scale Renewables Division. And I'm also the coordinator of the Elena facility, which you might have heard already. The facility is supported by the European Commission, makes available grant money in order to help develop projects, to implement projects. So it's not only studies, but when you ask for Elena grant, you also have the obligation to implement, to invest, which is sometimes a challenge, but we have here one good example, but you have other examples today also, from where Elena supports these projects in order to help develop the investments. And here we have a very interesting case in Ljubljana in Slovenia, where the local authority went for an energy performance contracting. I don't know if you have some ideas about what this is, energy performance contracting. Just a few words, I think. Alenka will go more into details afterwards, but basically is you cooperate as a public building owner with a private entity, an energy service company, which proposes to you a very efficient refurbishment of your building, and will engage on the results. Meaning that if they say you will have a reduction of 20%, they have to reach this level. And if they don't, they have penalties. This is very interesting because what we had in the morning, the discussion also with the representative of the Bank of Belgium, was the question: what is the reliability and the standardization? How can we be reliable on the results of projects, and how can these be more standardized? And one element to this challenge can be, for example, going for energy performance contracting. So we have two presentations. Alenka Lose, she is an engineer, and Marco Umberger, both from Ljubljana. Both are engineers, so I'm also engineer. I like engineers very well. But indeed, I mean, it's not sufficient, unfortunately. Very often, and I think you will see it also with the presentation, you need to have other capacities, management capacities, also know-how about financing, because in the end, the best technical project or design will not take place if it will be not implemented. So you have to find how to do it, with whom, and how can you finance it. So that's one of the main subjects today. So I'm very glad to have both of us with us today. So I will give them the floor. They should have some 30 minutes time to present, and afterwards we will have time for a question and answer session. The floor is yours, Alenka.
I will just start with my presentation. It is how to refurbish private, public, let's say, buildings with private-public partnership. It was the Sustainable Energy Action Plan that we adopted in 2011 in the city of Ljubljana that made us think about how to finance, let's say, the big investments that should be done within our SEAP. It was estimated that 1.5 billion of euros would be needed to realize this SEAP. So we decided to find some sources of financing for our retrofit of the buildings. So Ljubljana became a European Green Capital in 2016 because we were the fastest sustainable development in Europe. And to reach our goals, we have prepared all documents, and we also use financing. And we applied for technical assistance, Elena, for the energy retrofit, I already said. What is the EOL project? I already said 1 million euros we got about from technical assistant Elena, and for the investments about 50 million euros. We really realize these investments. They are ongoing at the moment. So it is the biggest ongoing investment in Slovenia and in Ljubljana. The project started on January 1st, 2013, and it ended at 31st December of 2016. It was a 3-year program, but we prolonged it for 1 year because we faced some difficulties in preparing the documentation or legal issues to make the projects realized. So at the beginning, we were enthusiastic. We got the technical assistance Elena resources. We have established the EOL group team of working team. We started with preparation, all the necessary documentation using this technical assistance money. And we also were performing non-EPC energy performance contracted investments in parallel in, let's say, refurbishment of energy infrastructure and objects that were not subject to the energy performance contracting. Why run over the hurdles? Because there were a lot of problems when we started. It was looking at the beginning as mission impossible, because there were no legal availability of basis for public-private partnership on energy performance contracting. Only few ESCOs companies were present in Slovenia. No experiences on our side with this approach, and a new way of work within city administration, new way of thinking, not investing by ourselves, but to put the private partner to invest instead of us. And resistance of public procurement approach of the, let's say, department of the objects that they would like just to work on the usual practice, so public procurement practice and not public-private partnership. And no availability of high-quality construction companies. Overcoming the hurdles, on the December, that means on the second year of the project, the guidelines were prepared by the government of the Slovenia, so the PPP EPC approach was feasible and possible. In Slovenia, the biggest investment project, as said already, and what we have done with this project, we really needed all possible financing approaches. So we have put all our buildings that were able to be retrofitted or needed to be retrofitted, and we also invest in infrastructure and also investment in renewable energy sources, and for some of them the cohesion funds were gained. Now what we have done, this is the procedure that we have to go through to come to the, let's say, signing the concession contracts for our refurbishments. I will skip these slides because they will be available for you to read it later, but we have to prepare all legal aspects of PPP EPC procedures to adopt the decrees by the City Council, and those were quite time-consuming, let's say, issues. So we started on October 14, 2014, and we ended in April 2016, opening of the, let's say, proposals for PPP EPC by two bidders, two offers. And it was Consortium Petrol and GGE and Istrabenz Plini. It was two companies that wanted to be our ESCOs. And then it was a procedure about a competitive dialogue, and it ended at the end of, let's say, at December of 2016, with one bidder that resigned, and the other bidder we signed the concession contracts. So during the competitive dialogue with those two bidders, from 106 proposed objects to be refurbished, the 48 objects were, for 48 objects the concession contracts were signed, because all these other objects were not, let's say, interesting for the private partner to invest in them. So at the beginning, these 106 objects were divided in three groups. One group, let's say, that the bidders, that the private companies were interested in, was deep energy retrofit of those objects, the other partial energy retrofit, and the C category was not suitable for EPC. But it was possible to move from C to A if, let's say, the city would also co-invest in these buildings. So at the end, we ended with 48 objects, and it was 2 categories: deep energy retrofit A objects and B objects partial retrofit. So you can see the 25 objects are being now, and we are finishing with this complete deep energy retrofit. And the other ones, partly energy retrofit, that means that the envelope of the objects or the windows, furniture were not changed. It was more on lighting and on the heat stations. So invitation for final bid was at 27th February 2007 for the final bid, and the signature of concession contracts was on April 6, 2017. For all tasks, let's say, we have different groups nominated by Mayor of the City of Ljubljana that are checking how the projects are going on, and they are for financial issues or for retrofit issues, and also for the survey of how the project is going on. And for group, now how the, let's say, shares of the savings, rich savings, are delivered between the partners. So we have 8 concession contracts for 4 groups of objects that are divided in A and B categories. So private partner has 60% of bonus savings, while, let's say, we as a City of Ljubljana have 40% of bonus savings. And 90 to 10 is regular savings. That is the promised savings that the private partner says that they will reach anyway. So this is how we are shares of our, let's say, savings. So now we are also going, we have the second tender for public-private partnership, second, and we are still in the competitive dialogue, so it is going on at the moment. So maybe some pictures. There is a health center that was retrofitted. The upper picture is before and the down picture is after, so you can see also that the insulation is thicker. It can be seen around the windows. And we have also, this is another health center. It's also retrofitted already completely. It is the kindergarten. This was very complex object and a lot of work to be done. This is primary school. And I think that all these people at the beginning, they were against this retrofit, and now they are very happy. And in this primary school, it was said that the headmaster said that they already have savings at about 1/3 of energy. So, investments in sustainable energy issues. This is one is retrofit of the building, and also we are trying to do everything that what we can do to introduce also the renewable energy sources. So I'll pass the floor for Mr. Umberger that will present this part of the presentation.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will just continue what Alenka mentioned at the beginning, and I will give you a few details about this, our first project, which we call it Phase 1. And this is the ESCO contract for the energy retrofit of 48 buildings. We are in the procedure of Phase 2, which includes another 18 buildings. What we did in this, or we're still doing this retrofit, we are retrofitting schools, kindergartens, health centers, sports halls, and city administrative buildings. And out of 48, we have 25 buildings with deep energy retrofit and 23 buildings partial energy retrofit. Alenka already explained what is the difference. And what I would like to point out here, deep energy retrofit does not mean deep renovation of buildings, because the term deep renovation of buildings, according to the EU standards, is the buildings which are where we save about 75 to 80% of energy. What we call deep energy retrofit is when we have 3 or more approaches or 3 more terms which we do, like building, refurbishing building envelope, changing windows, doing new installations, or doing some renewables. And the difference is in these certain technical details like U values. We have with deep renovation U value of 0.28. We have with deep renovation 0.15. We have double glazed windows with our energy retrofit, and we have triple glazing with deep retrofit. What is important for our project is that it has value of 14.9 million. This is the value of the project altogether. And out of this, 51% is financed by the private partner, 40% by the cohesion funds, and 9% by the city of Ljubljana. And this is what is very important. Another thing which is very important, the gentleman in the morning at the plenary session mentioned that it's difficult to get ESCOs who would do more than few objects. We managed to do 48 altogether. And what is even more important, ESCOs are generally more interested in measurements like taking new electricity or lighting or doing some mechanical engineering works. What we managed to do is we managed to do the building envelope refurbishment, some parts of like the window exchanges, and these terms, payback periods are over 20 years. So this is good for us that we made this altogether contract which lasts for 15 years. Regarding renewable energies, we have three parts which we used in our project. One is geothermal heat pumps of the capacity between 57 and 119 kilowatts, open loop system. Then we have solar collectors for hot water system, and we have one sports building swimming pool, which will have, we started reconstruction these days, and it will have 250 square meters of the collectors, which is quite a big project. And then we also continue and include the direct solar gains in south-oriented schools, because schools in Slovenia have very large windows due to the daylighting concept, and these windows are now directly controlled by the solar energy. What is very important to mention is that, and this is our experience in Slovenia, that these new generations of geothermal heat pumps, this is now the single most effective way of decreasing energy consumption. Because before there was always a rule that prior to the thermal insulation, you do the thermal insulation first and then heat pump second. Now with this exchange, the situation is vice versa. So they are much more cost effective, and the idea is if you have an old building that you put the heat pumps first and then the thermal insulation. What we use here, we use both. In our next phase, which will come, we also will do a big PV plant, which will be where we shall cover the roofs of the public transport space, and available area will be 14,000 square meters. If I put in short what are the advantages of the ESCO model, first of all, of course, small financial contribution. The city contributes only 9%. Then what is also very important, we have full-scale thermal comfort according to the Slovenian and EU standards, meaning the ambient temperature, the air exchange, and the humidity, meaning that the users cannot do it by themselves, but it's according to the standards. Another advantage of the ESCO model is that all risks regarding renovation, maintenance, management, and energy savings are taken by the private partner. It's important to notice that guaranteed energy savings, which are done by the private partner, and of course no payment if these realized savings according to the contract are not according to the real values. And also what is very important are the low maintenance costs. There are some disadvantages of the ESCO model for the public partner. First of all, that deep renovation or concept of nearly zero energy houses are not feasible. And this means that we have some orientation in Europe regarding nearly zero energy houses. We believe that we cannot do it with the ESCO model because the payback periods are becoming too long. And another thing which is a kind of disadvantage that there's a lower financial share of savings, which in our case is 10%. If I would like to say a few lessons which we have learned and which perhaps could be advice for somebody who will do in the future some ESCO model financing. First of all, there are not many energy companies for the deep energy retrofit in Slovenia. We also tried having an international bid, but we didn't get any new companies, so this is not good. Another one is, of course, long payback periods. In our case, this is 15 years. What is not good for the private partner is that there are very high pre-contract expenses for him. In case that he's not doing a business, then he would save a lot of money and spend a lot of money for pre-calculations, projects, site visits, etc. it is difficult and time-consuming checking of energy consumption baselines. Alenka mentioned before how much time did we take before signing the contract. What is very good and very important that it's more effective use of cohesion funds, because in our regimes where we had just normal financing model from Europe, that was not able to control very much the energy savings. But it's also important that this is with ESCO, we get optimum mix of energy savings and investment costs, because they're all controlled by the acceptable payback periods. What is difficult is very difficult to analyze maintenance costs before and after renovation of buildings. What is good, that ESCO model is more effective than usual practice of public procurement, as I mentioned before. And what is advised for the public partner, that he must control energy retrofit costs before signing the contract and after it. And what is the highest potential for the ESCO model is, I believe, the non-insulated buildings built before 1975, where the savings are the highest and then the costs are then the same as with the others. So this will be on. Alenka, please say your final word, as you mentioned before. Thank you.
Okay, 2 more pictures. This is the pumping tests before making a heat pump in one kindergarten. And this is this photovoltaic, let's say, area at our transport company that will be realized, I hope, within few years. So questions to be answered for everyone here. If you want to go with these public-private partnerships, energy performance contracting, what you have to ask yourself? Are there legal bases available? Is there a practice and budgetary issues that they're existing? Are the necessary data available? Are the ESCOs available? If not, check the market, international and national. Check the compatibility of planned projects. And also, are the stakeholders aware of the PPP EPC benefits? Because in our case, we find out that we will never be able to finance 50 million euros in energy retrofit. And in this case, it was possible with PPP EPC. And do they recognize the weaknesses? So it was at the beginning mission impossible. But as we were working hard and also together with the governmental and ministries and all the stakeholders that were involved, it is a success story. And if you don't believe in success, it will never happen. So this is all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alenka and Marco. Just perhaps, maybe I didn't seize everything. What I would like to know still is just information. What was the total amount of the contract, and how was this amount financed?
For the ESCOs, the amount is 14 million 900 euros.
Okay.
This first contract.
Okay. And how much did you get from the ERDF? Because you said also you had a structural funds.
40%.
We got from cohesion funds 40%.
So how much is this in euros?
In euros.
In euros, it's about
40% out of 14.9.
14.9 was the total amount of the contract.
Yes.
Okay.
And 40% out of this is cohesion.
Yes.
Okay.
And 51% is the private sector.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And
And
9%
is the
city of Ljubljana.
Okay. Okay. Good. This is, I think, was quite important to have a little bit the figures. Well, I think it was a very intense presentation, and I think Alenka and Marco touched some subjects which are really crucial to have in mind when looking at energy performance contracting. I'm really glad that they succeeded to implement this. So normally the floor is yours. So if you have questions, please. I think I will take 2 or 3, and then we ask them for answers. Could you please present yourself shortly? So the lady in the back, yes.
Hello. My name is Ivanka Pandelieva. I come from Bulgaria. I represent a region of Rodop, where we are now establishing a one-stop shop for public buildings renovation. And my question refers to the establishment of baseline for of consumption for the purpose of energy saving quantification. So, did you use energy audits of the buildings? And if so, who paid for them? Because this is something that should be paid. And then ESCOs, did they use these data, or they wanted to establish their own data of baseline consumption?
Very interesting question. Let's take several,
Okay.
yeah? You?
Yeah, my name is Alexander Antonenko. I'm from International Energy Charter, and we are right now working on the protection of energy performance contracts as well for the investors. And yeah, you presented the 10% of the guaranteed energy savings.
Yes.
This is quite a modest figures. Yeah, could you please explain how did you come up to 10%, not more? Because when we speak about the deep renovation, the figures can go up, extremely high. And there is also, I did not see in your presentation, maybe I missed this, the average consumption in kilowatt hours per square meters per year. Yes, and according to the Energy Performance Directive, if you do the deep renovation, you need to meet the minimum energy performance requirements of your building code. Could you please also explain how did you meet these requirements of the minimum energy performance after the deep renovation? Thank you.
The third question? Yeah.
Hi, good morning. This is Peter Vaskis from Philips Lighting Capital. I'm actually more of a banker and not a technical person. I have a question for the gentleman from the EIB. How do you evaluate or make a credit decision on a project like this? And how does it work with the, I guess, the ELENA fund that you mentioned? Does this fall under the EIB funding? Does it fall under ELENA? Is it both? Maybe you can say a few words on that.
Okay, thank you. So, Alenka, Marco.
Yeah.
Okay, the first, the energy baselines, we make these energy audits. That was the first, and it was paid all from the technical assistance ELENA, because it was preparation of documentation was completely paid by technical assistance ELENA in 90-10, I think, ratio.
Yes.
And also we have energy accounting system. That means that we have we are putting all our payments and all our energy consumption in one program, and we can get the results. And we made it since I think that the bills are since 1st of January 2013 till now. So we have quite a long history of. But we have to gather this at the beginning of the EOL project. So this was one of the first, let's say, things that we have done to find out what was the energy consumption per single object. And it was really difficult at the beginning. So this is this first answer. Yeah.
If I can just add, we did first what Alenka mentioned, and then the private partner came, and he did his own inspections. So at the end, we had to put together our experience regarding the energy consumption and the private partner's experience. And this was a kind of very long process. And this is why I also mentioned before that private partner has huge expenses before signing the contract. And if the contract is not signed, this is then really not good for him, meaning that you have really very few ESCO companies who are, well, even in Slovenia, I don't know how it is in other countries, you have very few ESCO companies who are ready to invest that kind of money for the pre-contract works and then do the things.
So basically they wanted to be sure about your calculation.
Definitely. They have to say at the end yes, because if we don't say yes, then they don't see the savings.
No, I mean, the ESCO company has to make up his own mind. He has to put efforts, as Arku said, that's right. I mean, they have to do more or less their own energy audit, because they have to understand what is the quality of the building, what are the potential savings, and what can they put, what kind of technologies they can use, and what will be the impact. I mean, what are the savings, and they will guarantee. I mean, if they say, if estimate it's 30%, but they will guarantee you only 25% because they want to have a margin, or even 20%. I mean, that's a normal game. The game is then more that you have competitors which have less margin than others, for example. I mean, that's where you can. But then it was still the question from the colleague from the energy charter.
Yeah, well, the answer is as following. We have different objects, and they have different consumption per square meter, like for schools, like for kindergartens, like for sports centers, and they're not according to the definition which is done by the very deep renovation of buildings. And this is what I also mentioned before. What are the U values of our buildings, and what are the U values of the deep renovation? Meaning, what we have in our project is that the savings are for the heat consumption between 18 and 53%, for the electricity between 7 and 37%. So also this regarding certain type of buildings, then we come to the standards after renovation, which are higher than the standards of the deep renovation of buildings which you mentioned before, meaning that my opinion is, you said that you have some different experience. Our experience is that you cannot do the deep renovation of buildings or concept of the nearly zero energy houses. You cannot do with the ESCO model, because simply it is not feasible. Because if you like to get this very high standard of insulation, then the payback periods for this are 20 or 25 years. So it is a good model. You get certain savings for sure. A public partner does not invest any money. But if we are talking about these nearly zero energy houses or deep renovation, this is not the case.
But to complement a little bit the answer by Marco, I mean, the share of the energy savings between the ESCO, the private partner, and the public authority is influencing the duration of the contract, of the ESCO contract. So if you as a municipality say, I want to have high savings right from the beginning, this means the contracts will be longer, because you need longer time. The ESCO needs longer time to be paid back. So that's why in general it's the practice is the local authority gets a discount of 10% from the start, but not more. It can be also less. I mean, you can also say I take 5 only, and then the contract is shorter. The question of the duration of the contract is quite crucial, because if you have longer contracts, you have also more risk what happens during this contract time. I mean, you have schools where the use might change because all of a sudden you have evening classes, or you close evening classes. I mean, so there are variables afterwards which will impact the baseline, the energy cost baseline, and that's why it's a kind of optimization which you have to do yourself between duration of the contract and the discount on the energy cost savings right from the start.
For the public partner, it is also in interest to have as long contracting period as possible, because the private partner is responsible for everything that he put in the object. So they take care that everything functions for, let's say, 15 years normally. So they have to replace all places that are broken or that they are not working in this time period. And it is usually the lifetime of the, let's say, unless it can damage earlier, and you have to, let's say, exchange the heat station within 7 years or within 5 years. So I think it is very important, let's say, issue.
Yeah.
And there was also the question about this ratio between private partner and public partner, 60-40 for bonus savings and regular savings. It was negotiated at the end before signing the concession contract, because they promised, let's say, the promised savings, we agreed to share that the shares will be 90 for the private partner and 10 for the, let's say, public partner. And what is more than these savings, it goes 60% for private partner and 40 for public partner. So this was just negotiated.
Well, this is also normally in the range of what one can see in general on contracts. Because I mean, this is the additional effort, the additional savings which will be generated. And indeed, I mean, if you want to have more savings, then what is the obligation of for the ESCO company? Then, if you give him more of this savings, then he is also more motivated, the private partner, to generate more savings. If you give him less, he will be less motivated. But I mean, what is important that you have a sufficient baseline for paying back the investment. Just one question. The question was raised from Philips Lighting. The credit decision on projects like this is in general. I mean, we have not so many. I must admit, we have not so many projects currently where we finance directly ESCO projects, because they are, as you see, it's 15 million euros. I mean, in general, don't finance this directly. But we would have to have a look at either at what is the capacity of the local authority to pay back, because they will refinance a big share to the ESCO, and also what is the standing of the ESCO. We will look at both in order to make up our mind. Regarding Elena is, as Alenka explained well, it's helping really the local authority to prepare all the works which are necessary to do this. So to make a good project, which is then also for us, but it could be also for Belfius or somebody, other banks, which are ready to finance such investments, because they are cautious, clearly, I mean, and they want to have securities, etc. And so the better you prepare, the more clear it is, the contracts, also the quality of the contracts, the better it is. Okay, I don't want to speak too much. Questions? Comments?
Just a quick one. Who were the private banks financing the ESCO?
No.
It was a private company. They invested themselves.
Yeah, but they had to probably get the money somewhere also.
I think they have in some sklady.
They have their own money. They're a private company. They have their own funds, but they're not any.
And ESCO typically needs financing, because you cannot finance this through cash flow, because the payback period is so long. You need debt financing, long-term debt financing. So there must be some long-term scheme behind this ESCO company, and that's usually. I'm asking this because that's usually a big bottleneck, because the ESCOs find it difficult to fund themselves long-term.
If I can just say, this company is not a specialized ESCO company. Right. It is a company. Yeah, it's a corporate who is doing also the selling. They have
so
petrol
they have
stations.
Corporate credit lines. Corporate credit lines.
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah.
If I may add a bit, because I'm fully agreeing with you on this topic. So this morning we heard the gentleman from Belfius say exactly this scale up, which we all understand is something we want, but that's actually a huge bottleneck. I mean, ESCOs are not very rich companies that have endless limits and just can go and take on any project. And I think there's a big role to play for funders in general, and I think the EIBs of the world have a lot of money to spend, though they of course have to make their evaluations on city A, B, C, and D, and they're not projects of 50 million. I'm very aware of that, but that's a huge issue, which is we want to scale up, and we think 1% of the buildings is not good enough, so it takes 100 years. But I think that's exactly where there's a huge issue. How do you get from one city to 100 cities in Slovenia, and et cetera, et cetera? How do you scale up? You need money, and you need ESCOs, I understand that. But they're not the same. ESCOs don't have endless money. I think that's a huge issue.
Okay, there's a comment from
Nicholas Stanchoff, a Dutch company that actually does third-party financing for ESCOs. I think before the financing, what we really need is your examples, and I'm really glad to see that you've given your email. I think the more precise we can be with the counterparts, be they cities or be they energy performance service companies, the better and sooner we'll be able to replicate. There's in your experience, there's knowledge that will save literally years for a misunderstanding, such a misunderstanding that the project doesn't go forward. And I think this is where your example can be very helpful because many cities don't have access to English, big problem. And being from Croatia, you probably could talk to quite a. I'm sorry,
Slovenia.
You could speak to Croatia. Being from Ljubljana, you could speak across a number of those countries. And this is really what we need in Eastern Europe today. Thank you.
Maybe just
Yeah, please, Alenka, please.
I can also say that in Slovenia, our, let's say, project was the first like this with the PPP EPC, and after our project started, let's say, to go into investments, there were also 3 others started afterwards on the same principle. So there are also a few municipalities put together in one project. And then there is Golea. It is about 21 cities, not cities that are also doing with Elena. So it is replicable in Slovenia.
And they're using your documentation?
Because now we have the baselines, even legal baselines, to do this.
And they can actually use your documentation?
We were available for them when they were preparing for, let's say, for the submission for the technical assistance, Elena. We were in contact because also there was one of them, mayor of one city, was in our EOL group, and they applied afterwards.
But I mean, you said that you kind of pushed the structure for energy performance contracting PPP in Slovenia.
Yes.
So you have you had also developed contracts, I suppose.
Yeah.
And these contracts, are they publicly available? Can they be copied, or is it your personal know-how?
It's publicly available.
Okay. Good. Okay. Good. No, sorry. I mean, the time is over. I'm very glad that we had the occasion to listen to Alenka and Marco presenting a successful energy performance contracting, and also for your question and your interest. For your information, Elena, we have the European Investment Bank has a stand outside, so if you have more questions, you can also ask this there. The next session will start in 15 minutes, so you have 15 minutes to grab a coffee or to ask some more questions also to Alenka and Marco. And thank you very much and have a nice day.
Okay.
Thank you.